Our dear viewers, welcome to Eiraka Fireplace Conversations, which is a community space organized by Eiraka Media. And this evening, we are privileged to have our 44th edition. My name is Bushenyi, and I am a nurse. I am so privileged to be the host and the moderator this evening. Talking briefly about Fireplace, it is a community-based organization and a space where people of the community come together and sit and discuss about different ideas, issues affecting the community, or what is transpiring within our communities. Mainly, we always talk about environment, public health, and governance. So previously, we have not been hosting conversations because of re-strategizing, and we have been planning to serve you better. At the moment, we are sitting at Kode Resort Hotel, that is in Tank Hill, Bushenyi, and we are having a very interesting topic, the impact of the ongoing heat on our health. So we are very, very privileged to have a very good person to speak to us this evening. He is a doctor and he is a public health person, and his name is Dr. Clifton. He will introduce himself better to us. So, Doctor, you are welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, our dear host. Ladies and gentlemen, the viewers who are out there, a very great appreciation to Eiraka for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm particularly interested in the topic of discussion of tonight. It's a very wonderful topic. Lately, I've been following on social media how people have been making memes out of the harsh weather condition which is happening right now. But that is just more than a meme. It actually sends a very big signal to the community that actually there is a problem, and people are trying to find ways on how to create awareness about it. Tonight's topic of heat wave is an interesting topic. Once again, my name is Dr. Clifton. I'm a public health advocate, medical doctor. When it comes to public health, it means these are issues that are affecting a greater population. And we cannot discuss issues that are of public health without talking about the cost impact. So if something is of the public health interest, that means it comes with cost involved in it. Meaning, at the end of the day, our families who are in the community are going to incur more when there is a public health emergency. And not forgetting our government definitely is going to also increase the cost. Now, talking about the heat wave that has been happening, maybe I would like to start by defining what a heat wave is, because our viewers out there might be interested to know what exactly is a heat wave, because they've been seeing it making rounds. So specifically, when you look at heat wave, it's basically a prolonged period of excessively high temperature. And this has become frequent and is becoming more common in the world today. And what are some of the factors that lead to the excessive heat wave that we see today? For many years, even in secondary school, we talk about what they call global warming. Now, what is global warming? So global warming is basically that change in the temperature rise. Realize that there are some factors that enhance the global warming that we see, the effect that we are seeing today. Back then in high school, they used to teach us of the ozone layer. There is a layer up that protects us from the direct exposure to the ultraviolet ray. But then you realize that today, because of man-made activities, this layer is being destructed by some of the human activity. For example, realize that the industrialization that came with a lot of emission of gases. These are called greenhouse gases. An example can be carbon dioxide, methane gas. But how do this carbon dioxide and methane gas come in? Realize that the human activity like burning of fossil fuel industrialization actually has gone on a rise. And then therefore we are emitting these greenhouse effect gases that trap in heat, and therefore it rises the temperature of the globe. And this is how the greenhouse effect coming and then the global warming coming. So when we see a period like this, according to Uganda Meteorological National Authority, you realize that according to that daily forecast, you realize that Kampala has never had a very high temperature like we have seen today in this month. We are talking about 34 degrees Celsius. That is very high. Now think about someone who is in Karamoja. Think about someone who is in West Nile, in Arua. What do you think they're going through? So therefore it becomes a very important topic for us. But I would like us to take this discussion to focus on what are some of the effects when it comes to the health impact of this excessive heat wave that we are going through. And I would like to specifically focus my discussion on basically 3 parameters. We're going to look at the effect of this prolonged heat wave, let's say on non-communicable diseases. Realize that the heat wave poses a very significant risk to people that are already having the non-communicable diseases. What are the non-communicable diseases? We're talking about people who have already hypertension, people who have already diabetes mellitus, even mental health to some extent. But also not forgetting, though they rarely talk about it, that the impact of this heat wave on some other things like skin cancer that can also come. So tonight I will be able to elaborate a bit more to alert our public about some of the impact of this heat wave on those 3 parameters. Yes. If you are to start off with what are the immediate effects that we get from the excessive heat wave. You know, generally in our body, we have what they call the normal physiology. That's the normal functioning of the body. Now, when the normal functioning of the body gets a problem, there is a process called homeostasis, keeping it in the normal process. So what happens that the normal process today has gone wrong, and that's how diseases come in. You get that? So the heat wave that coming is because we are getting what they call excessive exposure to the ultraviolet rays that come directly from the sun. Now these ultraviolet rays have an effect, and the more we get exposed to them, they accumulate and they bring what they call the heat wave exhaustion. Now what are some of the challenges that come with this exhaustion? You realize that they're going to set in some symptoms like dehydration, because when the heat is too much, you're going to sweat. And when you sweat, you're actually losing water from your body. So when you lose water from your body, what happens? The body has to respond.
That's true.
You get that? So how does this affect us? You realize that once you start losing water from your body, let's take a look at what happens to your heart. You realize that when you're losing more water, the blood becomes more thicker.
Sure.
See, yeah? So when it has become more thick, that means the blood which was moving at a steady pace, now the blood vessels and the heart are going to be congested. So what does that mean? That now the heart has to pump blood at a high velocity. Are you getting that? Because the blood has become thick. And now what does that mean? It means it's going to increase your heart rate. And that is why if someone already has a pre-existing condition like hypertension, because hypertension literally in a common language means high blood pressure. So now the heart has to work harder and pump faster to increase, because of the resistance which has already been created by the dehydration, which is due to the heat effect. So what does that mean? That the heart has to work faster, and therefore even your blood pressure again rises up. So meaning in the long run, the excessive heat has a direct impact on someone who has, let's say, pressure. Because at the end of the day, if your pressure was controlled and you get excessive exposure to this heat, you have a likely risk of even getting worse with your condition. And that is how it becomes a public health emergency and a public health concern.
Okay, so going to that, when it comes to the heart and cardiovascular issues, you want to tell us that these people who have hypertension, does it put them at a risk of it worsening? Maybe they have like complications, or for them it can remain normal, and then us who do not have the pressure, we are the only ones who are exposed?
Yeah, so that's a very nice question, and I believe our viewers out there will be very interested in understanding. First of all, the effect of this disease with heatwave puts everyone at risk. But according to literature, it says that people who already have pre-existing hypertension are actually going to be at more risk. Meaning, if you had your hypertension under control, the likelihood of it escalating is high. Because one, like we talked about the exhaustion stress that comes in, you realize that the heat dilates our vessels. And once the vessels have been dilated, temporarily we are going to have your blood pressure actually dropping down because of the dilatation that has happened. But then in the long run, the heart now has to pump harder and harder. So in the long run, you find that someone with already pre-existing condition like hypertension is actually at more risk because the chances of the hypertension getting out of hand are actually higher. And also it's like the complication. Let me explain to you more. Realize that this is what we call embolism in science, meaning chances that blood clots. Because if now we have dehydration, meaning the blood has become thick.
Yes.
So there is a chance that because of the thickness, blood is going to be moving slowly. And there is a very likelihood of forming a clot. That's what they call that emboli. So what happens when you get a clot? It means it's going to block the blood vessels. You get that? So when it blocks the blood vessels, remember, all our body function, our body organs depends on oxygen, and oxygen is delivered by blood. So you realize that we have some small blood vessels that, let's say, take blood to the heart, that take blood to the brain, that take blood to other parts of the body. So the moment they get clogged because of that emboli which has happened, meaning you are cutting off oxygen supply to those parts. And that's why you get scenarios, someone having what they call a very transient, like a stroke coming in from nowhere, someone that has been very normal, but because of the impact of what they call an emboli, it can go and then it blocks the blood vessels that supplies the brain, and people end up with stroke. And so these are the likely complications, yes, that can come in. So therefore it means the heat wave is actually something we shouldn't just take it lightly, but we need to understand into depth, especially if you already have already pre-existing condition. Now another condition that people also have it today, which is a bit rampant, that we need to understand, is diabetes mellitus. People in our community, when you have diabetes, people will say this one has sukari.
Yeah, true.
It has sugar.
Even us here.
So that's the little and like the local interpretation of what diabetes is. But it still takes us to the same principle, that if I am having, let's say, if I get a cup of water and I put in 1 spoon of sugar, that is going to be dilute. Right? I will take it. But if I increase the volume of the grams of sugar, but without increasing the volume of the water, for example, let's say I add 4 spoons into that same cup, it's going to be concentrated. And what does that mean? It's concentrated, it's going to be very sweet. Now let's borrow the same analogy. When you also lose a lot of water, let's say due to dehydration, what happens is your blood becomes thick and more concentrated with the sugar. You get the point? So once it's more concentrated, meaning what happens is the problem we see in people who have diabetes is because the body has failed to take away the sugar from blood saturation to take it to the tissues to use it. And that is what brings the problem. So you get that the same problem comes in, but the cause has been different. And secondly, we have specialized tissues that take away this blood from the bloodstream and give it to the tissue for use, called insulin. But then you realize that sometimes because of this heat wave, they can cause what they call resistance, meaning our transporter, the border that used to pick up us from maybe from work, tomorrow become resistant to us, that when we give him instruction, he doesn't listen. And then what happens is we end up in dilemma of how to go back home. So these are some of the key important aspects that we want the viewers and the community out there to understand, that it's not just a wave, but it has a very big health implication, especially to our people that already have pre-existing conditions. And most times these are the people who have diabetes, people who have pressure, and then even mental health. You get that?
Yes.
So mental health also comes into play, because you realize that usually when the heat is up, you're dehydrated, you become agitated. Now, agitation, in a simpler word, means agitation in a common man understanding. But when you look at the signs and symptoms that someone exhibits in a medical language, it can be referred to as anxiety. You get that? So meaning because someone is getting agitated, is getting stressed up, because the tissues are getting stressed up, and at the end of the day we end up with symptoms like anxiety and depression. You get that? So you realize that if you follow literature from other developed countries, the rate of suicide rates in developed countries is actually quite higher than us. It's because of, you realize that someone who lives in an urban setting, first of all, most urban settings in their nature have given a very big opportunity for global warming. You realize that here we are sitting, we have grass. The grass is helping us to transform energy into other forms without necessarily keeping energy in our environment. But when you go to most urban settings, the grasses have been replaced, the trees have been replaced by pavers. These are artificially made products that don't carry the activity that has been done by the grass, by the trees. Therefore, what does that mean? That we have more of the heat being contained within our environment that we live in. And because of the exposure that we get, you realize that even when you're treating people who have, let's say, a medical condition related to the health and the mental health, we give them drugs, but one of the therapy that we do is we advise them to be in a calm, a bit dark room, so that it can help them, to calm down the level of the hormone called cortisol, because that hormone is actually thrives so much in light. So realize that the suicide rates in those countries are actually higher than us, in poorly developed countries. But some of these facts we may not be able to relate them directly. But if you look at the scientific basis, and that's why we want our community today to know that it's actually very important for us to understand that the heat waves have a very big implication to our health.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. You talked about mental health, and I feel there is something that has been left out when it comes to that stress that is caused by, we are cattle keepers when it comes to the West, like in the areas like Chiruhuda, Kazo, those areas, they are cattle keepers. And in most times when the temperatures are very, very high, these cattle, they die. People lack what to eat. Some of them, I think in the north, we have heard how some of them have died. And I think, to me, don't you think there is a way it affects their mental health in that manner?
Yeah, you see, in life, one of the greatest things that give people comfort in life is the ability to possess a material that you feel like at the end of the day, this is going to be my livelihood.
Yeah, so, sure.
And every community has what it treasures as a source of livelihood, because that is a source of their income, is a source of pride. And then eventually it mentally makes people be in a stable state. So, of course, it has a very big impact, because if we are losing the cattle, we're losing the animals that has been the source, let's say, of our income. Therefore, if I had 4 of them and I've lost all, I've remained with nothing. I am not the same with someone who is in possession. And then in the long run, you realize that I'm actually getting signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety coming in, because I project my life forward. What is the likelihood that maybe 4 months from now, maybe I had a plan. I needed to purchase a few things, maybe invest a few things. But now I don't see the source because I have lost possession. So it's a very serious issue. I think possession of material and other things because of maybe a natural calamity which has happened, it's very important for us to understand. And that's why it's important for us to keep empowering community, to talk into community, so that we are able to find ways of how to adapt with the the changing climate that we are in today. What are some of the avenues or some of the things that we can do? And some of these things may not be only we may not only look at government, but what should government do for us to mitigate this? But we can actually scale it down to the level of a family.
Okay.
Yes.
Before we go there on what we can do, is there anything we can talk about? Because we talked about the non-communicable diseases, including cancer, skin cancer, including hypertension and its complications, and as well as DM, that is diabetes, which we call shkari in our area. So can we talk about the communicable diseases in any way?
Okay, so you realize that when it comes to disease transmission, we have what they call agents or factors that can lead to causation of a disease.
Okay.
And you realize that most times, most of the literatures that talk about infectious disease is because a disease is caused by an agent, which, let's say, the cause is known. For example, if you're talking about tuberculosis, TB, you realize that the effect may not be directly because of the heat wave, but it's because of someone has got in contact with tuberculosis causing agent, mycobacterium. You get that? So most literatures don't really write so much about infectious disease because of the nature of that transmission, that there must be an agent which is actually causing it. But I like to talk about one other aspect of the heat wave, and that is to cancers.
Okay.
You realize that most times when we talk about cancers, people get perturbed. You're like, how did I get this cancer? No one in our family has probably had it. You get it? And actually it's going higher in number. So like I earlier on mentioned, we have the ultraviolet ray, which comes from up, direct from the sun. And like I said earlier on, the ozone layer helps us to protect our exposure from that layer. Now the heat waves come in because the layer has been destroyed. So meaning we are having more exposure to the ultraviolet ray. Now, on our skin, we have very common cancers which have actually been associated to heat waves, and that is called the melanomas. So melanomas are basically when the heat waves or the ultraviolet rays hit on our skin, they have the ability to mutate. Mutation is probably change in structure and composition of the gene. And then when that happens, then we have what they call proliferation. We start developing skin cancer. I see. But the whole effect is because of overexposure to the sunlight. And that's why you will find that in some workplaces today, we have what they call occupational hazards. Basing on the nature of the work you do. You realize that in some occupations, like people who do welding or work in industry, you have protective measures or the gears you wear to avoid your exposure to these rays, to these rays. So in a span where we have this overall exposure, it can later on help like facilitate or improve or increase the risk of us developing that cancer. It's something that we don't see it directly, and most people tend to rub it off, but actually if you look at other countries, they're actually very much relation and linked to these cancers coming in. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Doctor, for that. We've talked about mental health. We've talked about the physical health. And when you talk about health, we have to talk about all the aspects: physical, mental, spiritual, and the other one is?
Today they can even look at the health economics, the financial bit.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So can we talk about spiritual? Briefly, shortly, is there any way this sun, this hot wave can affect people in our community in a spiritual way, so that we cover the whole, like holistic, the health topic?
Okay, I think if you look at our background as Africans, way back then, we had what they call the African Traditional Society. And you realize that if you move to some places, people attribute a prolonged climate change maybe to the specific maybe belief that they have.
Oh, yeah.
You get that? So people believe that maybe we're having a maybe prolonged heat or prolonged weather, rainy season, maybe because as a community, probably you have done a lot of bad things, and probably we're getting payments for what has happened. You get that? So when it comes to the spiritual aspect, it's a bit subjective. It varies from community to community, and there is no really one aspect that cuts across. That's why most people, when they're defining health, they leave out the aspect of spiritual upbringing. But I think it's a bit subjective, depends on the communities that we look in, because people tag them to different beliefs that people have. But of course, I think it's a responsibility of the health practitioners to ensure that people get awareness about some of these things that are happening in the community. And I believe when they are empowered with the knowledge, they'll be able to relate, but not necessarily looking at it as a belief,
as a punishment,
from God, or something that the ancestors are trying to give them a message.
Oh yeah,
you get it.
So, I've seen it on media.
A lot of places. So, and they vary from one community to the other community.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, as we have seen, the temperatures previously they were ranging from 29
to 29, 26, 29.
Yeah, to 30, and currently it is 34. It is a very huge change, and it really calls for us to do something about it. Is there anything that us, as people of this country, that we can do so that maybe if we are the contributing factors, as you said in the first place, we can try to reduce on the impact, on the health impact that we are having?
Okay, I thank you for the question. Just like we said at the beginning of my discussion, I mentioned that some of these factors that has led to this high heat are actually man-made. So meaning if it's man-made, there is also something that man can do, to help to minimize on the effect that we have. But let's start from the prevention measures that we can do as a person. You realize that one of the things we can do is that if we already have such a climate, there are many things we can do. One, we can adapt to the climate. How do we adapt to the climate? Realize that since it already has a direct impact on health, like we earlier on mentioned, meaning if you've been taking water, how much water do you take in a day? So according to the WHO and then our clinical guidelines, it recommends like about 2 to 3 liters of water. But on an average day, if you ask someone out there, how much water do they take? Some people don't even take 1 liter.
Definitely.
So I think that is one of the most important corrective measures we can start doing on a personal basis, like taking enough water, and then avoiding the highest peak where these rays are. Like for example, realize that at 1 it shines so high, So maybe if you're going out there in the sun, can you find a way of protecting yourself? Maybe carry an umbrella or other things. But also the most important thing that we need to do is we need to go back and relate to our environment, because that's where everything comes from. We've been destroying natural vegetations because of maybe what we want to do with them. But I think it's high time we go back to our community. Today I've seen homes that used to be green have been replaced by pavers. I think that is one of the mistakes that we're making today as families. That instead of having a natural compound, we are replacing them with turfs, artificially made grass, and pavers, just because they look nice. But at the end of the day, we are ignoring the health impact it brings. So I believe families still have a role to start by, first of all, making their homes green. Start by making your back compound green, and then let's go ahead and do campaigns on how we can maybe do more planting of trees in our compounds and in the community where we live in, because this is the only way we are going to relate back to our environment. And that means we need to support the environment so that the environment can support us by going green, by providing more trees and making our homes green instead of artificially made products that actually hold much of the heat to our community, and at the end of the day we suffer the consequences. Yes.
Thank you so much, Doctor. As we have seen about the tree planting, we've seen in a way to put away these high temperatures. There is something we can do. the removing of the pavers, and then we put the trees, we leave our natural compounds all the time, and then also we can try to mitigate the effects of this heat to our bodies by taking water, avoiding highest peak, as he said. That is what we can do as people of the communities.
All right. Thank you for having me. My final word to our listeners who are out there in the community is that today we have learned that the high heat waves actually have a very big impact it poses on our health. And we've taken you through some of the health conditions that if we have, it actually increases our risk of the disease getting worse. So I believe, like we've learned today, let's do the first things first. Let's stay rehydrated, take enough water, take about 2 to 3 liters of water, stay hydrated so that you don't stress your body. Let's avoid too much heat, like the sun. If you may have to buy an umbrella or to buy a cape, please put on it. I know some of you may ask, what about us who are the boarders? How do we prevent this? I've seen boarders have a very customized, nice umbrellas for their rides. So let's encourage that kind of innovations. And then to the general community, realize that our health is our wealth. And if we don't protect our health, therefore it also brings the burden to us as a family. And at the end of the day, we're going to have what they call the health financial impact to our family. So let's stay rehydrated and let's avoid too much exposure to the sun. Thank you so much. See you next time.
That's to the end of this topic today. We want to thank you, our dear viewers, for the attention that you have given unto us. You can still let us know your views about what you think about this topic. Thank you for listening. Next time, the same time and the same place. And lastly, I want to thank you, Doctor. You have been of so much value. I know people are going to learn from this. First of all, I didn't know about the pavers. I could not take it into notice that this can bring an effect on the climate change. It can contribute to it, sorry. So really, I want to thank you so much. And we pray that next time, if you're called upon, you come.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.